Sometimes, history isn't in books. It's in the eyes of a child who died more than 100 years ago. In 1854, on a Georgia plantation, a photograph of 5 slave children playing under a tree was taken. Everything seemed peaceful, until a historian stumbled upon a strange detail, one that no one else had noticed. From there, a series of discoveries unfolded: torn diaries, old recordings, and vague accounts of a room where children's laughter once rang out and then disappeared. Tonight's story is more than just a photograph. It's about memory, about guilt, and about echoes that time cannot silence. It was supposed to be just another photograph in the archives, another frozen moment from a world long buried beneath dust and memory. But for Dr. Michael Torres, that afternoon inside the Library of Congress would not fade so easily. He had spent 15 quiet years digitizing the past, frame after frame, photograph after photograph. He thought he'd seen it all: the carefully posed smiles, the manufactured scenes of Southern harmony. But this single daguerreotype from 1854 stopped him cold. 5 black children, barefoot, standing in the dirt yard of a plantation in Ashford, Georgia. Their faces blurred from the long exposure time, their small bodies stiff as though holding their breath for the camera. The handwritten caption below read cheerfully, "Our Negro children content and happy in their carefree play." Michael knew what this was: pro-slavery propaganda, the kind designed to soothe northern consciences, to paint captivity as kindness. He had seen hundreds like it before. But something about this one unsettled him differently. Maybe it was the stiffness of their limbs. Maybe it was the faint tension in their eyes. Or maybe it was the strange, uneven texture of the ground beneath them. He loaded the high-resolution scan into his imaging software, just as he always did. Routine. Objective. At least it should have been. He began where he always began. The faces first, the smallest. Perhaps 5 years old. The oldest, no more than 10. Then the clothing, plain cotton, worn thin. Then the ground. The dirt was hard-packed, reddish, scarred by footsteps. A few weak blades of grass struggled for life. But when Michael zoomed in near the children's hands and feet, something caught the light. Small metallic glints, tiny shapes half buried in shadow. He leaned closer, his heart beginning to thud. He adjusted contrast, brightened the exposure, and the scene changed. The shapes were not pebbles or tools. They were bands, chains, tiny shackles, small enough for wrists the size of his thumb. The children were playing with them, draping the chains across their arms like ribbons, swinging them like jump ropes. And the wooden objects scattered nearby. Crude toys carved from something darker. Punishment posts, broken tools, the very remnants of the world that kept them bound. Michael's breath faltered. He picked up his phone with trembling fingers. There was only one person who needed to see this: Dr. Jennifer Washington, director of the American Memory Project. Within 20 minutes, she arrived, bringing with her Dr. Raymond Foster, a historian who had spent years studying the lives of enslaved children. The 3 of them crowded around the monitor, silent, the blue glow of the screen washing over their faces. "I've enhanced every visible object," Michael murmured, pointing at the display. At least a dozen within 3 feet of the children. Every single one restraints or fragments repurposed from punishment equipment. Raymond's brow furrowed. That one there, he said softly, pointing near the smallest child's foot. That's a wrist shackle. Look at the size maybe for a 6-year-old. Jennifer's eyes drifted to the center of the image. And the girl, she whispered. She's holding the chain, like a jump rope. You can see both her hands gripping it. She must have been mid-swing when the photographer told her to stand still. Michael clicked again, zooming in on a rough wooden figure. I thought it was a doll, he said, voice breaking slightly. But the wood's too dark. Look, the grain's wrong. There's metal in it. Iron fragments, nails. Raymond's face went pale. That's from a whipping post, he said finally. The stains, that's blood soaked deep into the wood. Someone carved a toy from the post, used to punish their own people. No one spoke after that. The hum of the computer fan was the only sound in the room. Jennifer walked slowly to the window, overlooking the National Mall. Her reflection trembled against the glass. We need context, she said. Who took this photograph and why? Michael opened the metadata file. Charles Whitfield, he said. Savannah photographer. Specialized in plantation portraiture. He was hired to make slavery look humane. Sent these to northern newspapers and abolitionist circles to prove the kindness of southern masters. Raymond exhaled sharply. So this was propaganda. Jennifer nodded, her voice low. Whitfield was paid to show happy, well-treated slaves. But what he didn't see, or didn't care to see, were the chains at their feet. She turned back to the screen, her expression unreadable. To him, she whispered, the tools of their suffering were invisible. Just part of the scenery. And for a long while, none of them moved. 3 historians staring into the eyes of children long gone who had once been told to smile for the camera. While their hands still held the chains that bound them, they literally couldn't see the horror because they refused to see those children as human. Jennifer's words hung in the air like dust motes in fading light. Raymond said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, he reached for his notebook. I need the Ashford plantation records, he said. If these restraints were made for children, there has to be documentation. Purchase orders, blacksmith invoices, punishment logs. Michael looked up sharply. Those logs exist. Raymond's eyes darkened. Sometimes, he said, some plantations kept everything, every lashing, every confinement, even those done to children. Jennifer leaned closer to the monitor again. The children's smiles, she couldn't stop seeing them. Their mouths smile, she whispered. But their eyes don't. This isn't happiness. It's obedience. They were told to smile for the camera. A few days later, under a heavy Georgia sun, Raymond Foster arrived at the Historical Society in Savannah. The air was thick, almost hard to breathe. Archivist Henry Crawford met him at the door, his voice gentle but strained. The Ashford collection is large, he said. Mostly untouched since the 1920s. The family kept everything. Inside the climate-controlled research room, the air was cool, but felt no less heavy. Crawford set several grey archival boxes on the table. Everything from weather journals to livestock ledgers, he said softly. And yes, punishment records. Disturbing to read. I warn you, Raymond nodded, though his stomach had already tightened. The first box contained plantation ledgers from 1850 to 1860, rows of neat handwriting in fading brown ink. Within an hour, he found it. A Charleston blacksmith's invoice dated March 1852. Restraints juvenile size. Quantity 6 sets. Total cost $42. He paused. $42. Then nearly $1,500 today. Someone had paid handsomely for custom-made shackles for children. He turned the next page and the horror deepened. The second box held punishment logs. Detailed, organized, and horrifyingly calm. Each entry a record of suffering dressed in bureaucracy. March 15th, 1853 girl age, 7 named patients. 10 lashes for dropping pottery. June 3rd, 1853 boy, age 9, named Samuel, confined in shackles for 24 hours for attempting to learn reading. Raymond's hands trembled as he photographed each page. The ink, the language, it all felt too precise, too practiced. Children as young as 5, punished for what any other child might have done, dropping something, daydreaming, being curious. And then he saw the line that made him stop breathing. August 12th, 1854. Photographer Whitfield arrived from Savannah. Children prepared for portrait. Restraints removed for photography session. Duration 2 hours. Play activity supervised in yard. Restraints reapplied following session. The same date. The same day that image was captured. The children's brief moment of freedom had been staged, orchestrated for the camera's lie. They had been told to play, told to smile, told to hold chains like toys. And when the lens closed, the restraints returned. Raymond sat back, staring at the page. The entry confirmed what he feared most. For the Ashford plantation, those restraints weren't punishments. They were policy, routine, a method of control that began the moment a child could walk. He kept reading. Every page painted the same quiet cruelty. Children starting work at 5 or 6, performing light tasks, then heavier ones soon after. No education, little food, no tenderness. And when they stumbled, the lash, the shackle, the post. In another box, he found a birth registry. The handwriting was delicate, deliberate. A list of enslaved children born between 1844 and 1854. When he cross-referenced ages with the punishment logs, the pattern emerged: 5 names. Sarah, age 10. Thomas, 8. Patience, 7. Samuel, 6. And little Grace, just 5. The same 5 faces from the photograph, each name accompanied by a mother's but never a father's. The fathers were not recorded, not acknowledged. Raymond felt his throat tighten. He whispered each name softly, almost like a prayer. Tracing their descendants would be almost impossible. Enslaved families were scattered, renamed, erased. But he knew someone who specialized in the impossible, Dr. Angela Morris, a genealogist who had spent her career piecing together the lives that history tried to forget. Together, they began the search. They started with the 1870 census, the first to record the names of people who had once been enslaved in Burke County, Georgia, the same soil that had swallowed the Ashford plantation. They found a name. Sarah Ashford, age 26, living with her husband Robert. 3 children. The surname told its own quiet story. Many freed families had taken the name of the people who once owned them, a painful inheritance carved into paper. Still, there was something profoundly human about that record. Sarah had lived. She had grown. She had named her children, something her own mother had not been allowed to do freely. Raymond stared at the census entry for a long time. It wasn't just ink anymore. It was the first hint of voice reaching out across the centuries. The age matched perfectly. Sarah had been 10 in 1854, 26 in 1870. "It's her," Angela whispered, her eyes on the faded census page. "That's Sarah from the photograph." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The little girl with the chain, she had survived. She had lived through war, through freedom, through all the years that followed. She had married, raised children, built a life beyond the plantation. Now the question was, how far did her story reach? Angela began tracing the line: forward marriage records, death certificates, property deeds. The paper trail of a woman who once existed only as a face in a photograph. Sarah lived until 1903, dying at 59 in Atlanta. Her children and grandchildren scattered across Georgia and later further north during the Great Migration. 2 weeks of long nights and careful searching led Angela to a name that stopped her cold: Dr. Lorraine Hayes, retired educator, Philadelphia. Great-great-granddaughter of Sarah, the girl from the Ashford photograph. Raymond dialed her number on a quiet Tuesday evening. His heart raced as he rehearsed what to say, how to explain the photograph, the discovery, the truth beneath it. "Dr. Hayes." Her voice was warm but guarded. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Dr. Raymond Foster. I am a historian researching the Ashford plantation in Georgia." There was a pause, then a sigh. "My grandmother used to talk about that place," she said softly. "Nothing good ever came from it." "What have you found?" Raymond explained everything. The photograph, the ground, littered with chains and wooden fragments. The plantation records detailing punishment of children. As he spoke, he sent her the enhanced image. For a few seconds, only silence answered him. Then came a trembling whisper. "That's my great-great-grandmother. That little girl, holding the chain." "Yes," Raymond said quietly. "We believe so." Sarah, 10 years old, photographed on August 12, 1854. She's the eldest child. Dr. Hayes's voice broke. "She's playing with it like it's a jump rope, like it's something harmless. Records show she had been restrained with those same chains earlier that morning." Raymond said gently. "They removed them for the photograph, then put them back afterward. Those were the only objects the children had, the only things they could play with." On the other end of the line, he heard her crying softly. "My grandmother used to tell a story," she whispered, "that her grandmother Sarah never let the family's children play with anything metal. No toy soldiers, no tin cups. She'd say, 'Metal brings trouble.' We thought she was just superstitious. But this," her breath shook, "this explains everything." While Raymond traced the living threads of Sarah's bloodline, Michael Torres and Jennifer Washington turned their attention to the man who had taken the photograph, Charles Whitfield. At first glance, he was simply another Southern studio photographer. Savannah, 1848 to 1872. His clientele plantation owners, merchants, politicians. His reputation flattering portraits gentle light, and in the 1850s carefully staged images meant to prove the benevolence of slavery. But inside Whitfield's personal papers, stored in a quiet room of the Savannah Historical Society, Michael found something unexpected, a small leather-bound journal. Its entries were sparse, sometimes months apart, but what they revealed was a man divided. July 1854. A few weeks before the Ashford photograph, I am hired to create lies with my camera. They want smiling faces, healthy children, neat fields. They want proof that their peculiar institution is kind. But what I see through the lens tells another story. I see chains. I see children who labor instead of play. I see families torn apart, yet I still take their money. I feed my own family with the wages of deceit. I am complicit in evil, and I know it. Jennifer read the passage slowly, her eyes wide. He knew, she murmured. He knew exactly what he was doing, and still did it. Michael nodded. Wait, he said. There's more. He opened to the next dated entry, August 1854, the month of the Ashford photograph. Today I photographed children at the Ashford place. The overseer arranged them in the yard, told them to play naturally, as if such a thing were possible. I saw what surrounded them, shackles, chains, pieces of the whipping post carved into crude toys. I made sure my lens captured them all. The masters will not notice, nor will the northern buyers who seek comfort in the image. But perhaps, someday, someone will look closely enough to see what I saw. Perhaps this photograph will tell the truth they paid me to hide. Jennifer stared at the page, her voice barely a whisper. He did it deliberately. He left evidence in plain sight. It was no accident. It was defiance. Quiet, careful rebellion through art. Further entries revealed the same subtle acts portraits where whipping scars were visible, where eyes looked tired rather than joyful, where cracks in the illusion could be seen if one only cared to look. Charles Whitfield had made his living selling lies, but within those lies he buried fragments of truth, hoping someone someday would uncover them. Still, he never spoke out, never wrote publicly, never risked open defiance. He carried his guilt in silence, one photograph at a time. To understand exactly what the children had been holding, Jennifer called in another expert, Dr. Patricia Chen, a forensic archaeologist who had spent years studying artifacts from slavery-era sites. If they could match the objects visible in the photograph to known examples from excavations, they might finally prove what those children had truly been playing with that day. Dr. Chen leaned toward the screen, her eyes scanning the enhanced image. She had seen hundreds of artifacts, shackles, collars, fragments of iron too small to belong anywhere but the past's darkest corners. But as she studied this photograph, her expression hardened. "I've excavated these," she murmured. "Not toys, not tools. These are the things that kept children from running, from learning, from being free." "These objects," Dr. Patricia Chen said quietly, her gloved hands hovering above the magnified image, are consistent with restraint devices used across the South in the mid-19th century. The iron cuffs were small, heartbreakingly small. These were mass-produced in northern factories, she continued, then shipped south, sold to plantations by the thousands. She traced the faint outline of the links in the photograph. standard configuration for leg irons. Then her tone softened. But these wooden figures, they're different. Enslaved people, even children, repurposed what surrounded them. Punishment posts, broken handles, auction block wood. There's a term for it, adaptive reuse. But that phrase doesn't capture the truth. She looked up from the photograph. This was survival. Taking what was used to dehumanize and remaking it into something that could belong to life again. Even play. To understand more, Jennifer arranged for Patricia to visit museum collections across the country. In the quiet vaults of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they studied restraints made for children, some no larger than a wristwatch. Patricia lifted a pair gently. These were called precautionary, she said, but they were tools of control. A child raised in chains learns one lesson, that freedom isn't real. She then showed them a small carved doll, its surface darkened by time, and something else. This one, she whispered, was carved from a whipping post. Those dark stains, that's blood. Within weeks, Patricia organized a modest excavation at the former Ashford plantation, now a wildlife preserve. Using the photograph as a map, her team began to dig where the children had once stood. 3 feet down in the 1850s soil layer, they found them. 2 small iron shackles, fragments of chain, pieces of carved wood, part of a doll, maybe an animal, a corroded lock, and a child's toy, a simple wooden top, initials etched faintly into the grain, S.A. Raymond's breath caught. Sarah Ashford, he murmured. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, the Library of Congress held a press conference. The 1854 photograph glowed on a vast screen behind historian Jennifer Washington as she addressed the crowded hall, journalists, scholars, descendants. For 170 years, she began this image has existed as pro-slavery propaganda proof, supposedly of contentment. But technology allows us to see what was always there waiting. The image zoomed in. The dirt came into focus. Chains, shackles, carved toys from punishment posts. These children, she said softly, were not playing. They were performing survival, smiling under orders, holding the very instruments used to hurt them. The same chains removed moments before the photograph and clasped again after. Then she stepped aside for Dr. Lorraine Hayes, Sarah's great-great-granddaughter. My grandmother told me, Dr. Hayes began, her voice trembling, that her grandmother Sarah never let children in the family touch anything made of metal. No toys, no tin cups. She said metal was trouble. We thought she was superstitious. Now, we know why. She looked at the photograph behind her. The little girl, the chain, the forced smile. She bore witness, Dr. Hayes said, the only way she could. Raymond followed with the archaeological evidence, the carved wood, the rusted metal, the initials carved by a child who could not yet spell freedom. Raymond's voice trembled as he spoke before the crowded room. The shackles, the chains, the wooden top with Sarah's initials. He paused, eyes fixed on the projected image. This photograph isn't just a relic. It's a crime scene, a record of child abuse, psychological torture, and systematic dehumanization. And it was created as propaganda to justify it all. The words hung in the air like a chill. Cameras clicked softly. No one moved. For 3 hours, the press conference continued. Journalists, historians, and descendants asking about Whitfield, the man behind the lens. Jennifer Washington addressed it plainly. Yes, Whitfield wrote that he framed this image to expose the hidden truth that he wanted the symbols of bondage to remain visible. Some might read that as courage or moral conflict. But let's be clear, he profited from slavery. He was part of the system he quietly condemned. The revelation ignited a nationwide reckoning. Researchers began to re-examine thousands of slavery-era photographs once thought benign. Jennifer led a collaborative project linking archives, museums, and universities using advanced imaging to peel back the surface of history. What they found was devastating. In photograph after photograph, the same quiet horrors appeared hidden in plain sight. A Louisiana image of children playing near a barn revealed faint scars across small arms and legs. A Mississippi family portrait showed ankle irons just visible beneath the father's trouser cuffs. A South Carolina field scene smiling children before a wooden post contained traces of dried blood, darkening the grain. These images were designed to lie, Jennifer said, later at a symposium, to sell the illusion of contentment. But if you look closely enough, the truth has always been there waiting for someone to finally see it. Meanwhile, Dr. Raymond Foster expanded his study of punishment ledgers from plantations across the South. What he found was equally harrowing. Child restraint, he reported, was not exceptional. It was ordinary. Children as young as 4 were chained, confined, and whipped, and sometimes they played with their restraints. It was not play as we understand it. It was adaptation, survival. Dr. Patricia Chen's archaeological teams followed the trail. Guided by the enhanced images, they excavated former plantation sites, and again the ground gave up its silence. Child-sized shackles, broken chain links, carved wooden animals made from whipping posts, fragments of lost childhoods. But among these pieces of sorrow, Patricia found something else, something fiercely human. Tiny initials carved into toys, decorative patterns, perhaps secret codes. Small creative acts that whispered defiance. Yes, Patricia said, holding one of the fragile toys before the press. They were forced to play with chains, but they also carved. They imagined. They refused to be erased. The photograph shows both the horror and the resilience. Dr. Hayes and other descendants became powerful advocates, ensuring the photograph was no longer seen as an image of happy servitude, but as a layered testimony of survival, of endurance of memory. Within a year, it became one of the most widely used primary sources in teaching the history of American slavery. Yet, that brought new questions: how to teach such an image without inflicting harm. Dr. Angela Morris began working with educators nationwide. For younger students, lessons focused on resilience, that even in the harshest conditions, children created, imagined, and found ways to play. The word restraint never appeared. Instead, they spoke of courage and creativity. For middle school classrooms, the approach shifted. Teachers began by projecting the unedited photograph. "What do you see?" they'd ask. And almost every time the first answers were the same: children playing. And then gently, the truth unfolded. Then came the enhanced images, objects once invisible, now sharp and undeniable. Shackles, chains, carved toys from punishment posts. The contrast between what people thought they saw and what was truly there became a powerful lesson. how easily photographs can lie, how propaganda shapes memory, and why we must always look closer. High school and university classes began to study the Ashford photograph as both artifact and testimony. Students read plantation ledgers and Whitfield's tormented journal, examined archaeological reports, and listened to the descendants' stories. They explored how a single image could serve two masters, as propaganda meant to deceive and as accidental documentation of survival. Dr. Lorraine Hayes became a frequent guest in classrooms, bringing family photographs spanning 5 generations from Sarah in 1854 to her own grandchildren. This, she told the students, gesturing between the images, is what resistance looks like. My great-great-grandmother was forced to play with chains as a child, but she lived. She built a life, and here I stand, a doctor, a free woman. That is her victory. Teachers reported something remarkable. Students who had never connected with history before now felt its weight. Seeing children their own age holding instruments of torture stripped away any illusion of a gentle South. Yet the lessons didn't stop at horror. They also spoke of resilience, imagination, and the human instinct to endure. One Atlanta teacher wrote afterward, "My students will never forget that photograph. It changed how they see everything, not just slavery, but how power hides truth, how propaganda works, and why it matters to look closer." On a humid Georgia morning in August 2025, exactly 171 years after the photograph was taken, a memorial was unveiled at the former Ashford plantation. 5 bronze figures stood where the children once had: Sarah Thomas Patience, Samuel, and little Grace. Each child rendered with haunting realism the same postures as in 1854. But this time, the chains and crude wooden toys were cast in bronze too. Unmissable, unavoidable. More than 300 people gathered beneath the same ancient oaks whose roots had witnessed everything. Descendant scholars, state officials, and strangers stood together in reverent silence. Jennifer Washington spoke first. For 170 years, this image existed as propaganda, a lie meant to disguise cruelty as care. But these children refused to let the truth die. They held it in their hands, right where the camera could see, waiting for anyone to finally look close enough. Today we honor that trust. Then Raymond Foster stepped forward and read the names: Sarah, age 10, Thomas, 8, Patience, 7, Samuel, 6, Grace, 5. With each name, a descendant laid flowers at the base of the memorial. When he reached Grace, the youngest, who died just 3 years later, the crowd fell utterly silent. Dr. Hayes approached the podium last. Her voice trembled, but her words did not. My great-great-grandmother Sarah lived to 59. She survived slavery, the war, and the long years that followed. She never spoke about what happened here. Some wounds are too deep for words. But she left us this photograph. She made sure we would see, and now we do. Beside the memorial, an interactive exhibit allowed visitors to relive that moment of revelation. The original image first appearing ordinary, then zooming closer until the hidden objects emerged. Children visiting could feel the same dawning realization Michael Torres once felt in that archive room: how what looks harmless can conceal unimaginable pain. Under a glass enclosure nearby, Patricia Chen had preserved a small excavation site, the actual artifacts recovered from that yard. These are real, she told the gathering. These shackles restrained real children. These chains bound real bodies. This is not symbol or metaphor. This is evidence. As the ceremony ended and the crowd drifted away, Dr. Hayes lingered alone before the bronze sculpture of Sarah, the girl frozen mid-motion, chain in hand, her gaze meeting the unseen photographer's lens. "You did it," Dr. Hayes whispered softly to her ancestor. "We see you now."